It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. The Verdict is brought to you in part by Betcher, Martin, Jean, and Jackson, when hurt people need help. Betcher, Martin, Jean, and Jackson in Ponca City. It's time for The Verdict.
And welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. Thank you for joining us this morning. My partner this morning is Kent Myers. Kent, what do we have today?
Today we're talking about a rather somber subject, but we have some pretty delightful people to talk with about it. In Oklahoma County alone, there would be a minimum of about 4,000 children who have been abused, deprived, and are out of their homes and in the juvenile court system. Now, we're talking not about kids who have violated the law in some respect. We're talking about kids that have been abused by parents or deprived of care and nurturing. And it is a huge problem in Oklahoma County, but it is a huge problem nationwide. And there is an organization called the National Children's Law Network that has gathered a group of 8 organizations to try to see how these problems are handled from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and how to do a better job of it. And today we're going to be talking with a couple of the guests we have from out of town, one from Philadelphia, one from Los Angeles. They're in town to meet with others here in Oklahoma City to talk about what can be done to improve the plight of abused and deprived children.
Children in the legal system. We'll be right back. You're watching The Verdict.
Come on down.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Kent's going to introduce our guests.
Today we have 2 fine guests to talk to us about the problems of abused and deprived children, not simply in Oklahoma, but nationwide. Across the table from me is Jenny Weisz. She's the directing attorney of the Children's Rights Project in Los Angeles. That center provides pro bono legal services for abused and deprived children as well as others. She's a graduate of Cornell Law School in getting her law degree. She teaches at the University of Southern California Law School, and pleased to say that in this year, 2004, she was named Child Advocate of the Year by the American Psychological Association. Welcome to Oklahoma and welcome to The Verdict.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here.
We're pleased to have you.
Thank you.
Next to me is a friend of mine of a number of years, Frank Cervone. Frank is from Philadelphia. He's the executive director of the Support Center for Child Advocates in Philadelphia, a law graduate of Villanova University, has been in public interest law for many years. The Support Center for Child Advocates in Philadelphia is the oldest and largest pro bono legal services agency in the United States, and Frank is the executive director and has been for a number of years. He has been the co-chair of the American Bar Association Task Force on Children. He, like Jenny, although from a different organization, was designated in 1998 as the Child Advocate of the Year by the American Bar Association. And Frank is one of the founding members of the National Children's Law Network, as well as being instrumental in getting Oklahoma Lawyers for Children up and running. Welcome to The Verdict and welcome to Oklahoma.
Well, it's great to be back with you, Kent.
I'm glad you're here.
Hey, Frank, let's start with the basic question. What is the National Children's Law Network?
We're a group of 8 locally oriented children's law shops. These are public interest law firms, lawyers, social workers, and support staff who provide legal service to kids who have either been involved in the abuse or neglect system or the delinquency system. And the network is an opportunity for 8 local shops to do something national. We're supporting each other by kind of growing our own capacity to serve and by learning about our work. And we are trying to teach the world some things while we, in a sense, teach ourselves.
We've got a map of the United States that shows where these 8 centers are located. Let's take a look at the map and then have you talk us through it. And really, Oklahoma's in some pretty good company here.
Well, these are fine programs. Some are long-standing in duration and service. The Northwestern Law School, Children and Family Justice Center in Chicago, the Office of Public Counsel, where Jenny works, in Los Angeles, our own office, the Support Center for Child Advocates in Philadelphia, have all been around for 20 years or more. Some of the young shops are in Charlottesville, Virginia, the Just Children program. The Children's Law Center of Massachusetts is another 25-year-old plus program just outside of Boston in Lynn, Massachusetts. The Rocky Mountain Children's Law Center in Denver, Colorado. And the Children's Law Center of Minnesota is another young program started around the time of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, your own very fine program, which I think this year is about 7 years old.
That's right.
Would you like to have more?
Oh, we need more desperately. There are kids, as you'll hear us talk today, there are kids in every jurisdiction, in every town and city across the nation, in need of lawyers, and really we think in need of better lawyers. Our work is about improving lawyering for children.
Jenny, let me ask you, what do you see as some of the goals of this National Children's Law Network, this 8-organization group?
One thing we're trying to promote is much higher involvement of pro bono attorneys, that is, attorneys who give their time to represent children. We want to make sure if they do give their time to represent children, they get the best training possible, because you need to be well trained in order to represent well. And what we want is better outcomes for children because of this representation, so that the representation will be goal-oriented to give children stability and a successful future. And we think with good, strong pro bono representation, that's going to happen.
Let me change it just a minute. You're out of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Focus a little bit on your own center there. How many volunteers do you have?
Well,
that are active?
we have hundreds of volunteers, and our Children's Rights Project alone, we help about 6,000 cases run through the Children's Rights Project in a year, and we have hundreds of volunteers. Many of them are interested in doing adoption cases of children out of foster care. We've helped over 4,200 children be adopted in the last several years, and our law firms love to do that because it makes you feel good, and you get to know families that are doing just a wonderful thing to help these children. We have volunteers. One law firm in particular is focusing on children who have special education needs, and we've trained them to focus on children in foster care who have serious educational problems. Another law firm helps children who are getting probate guardianships because they live with non-parents who have volunteered to come in and take care. So they're finding a niche for their own special interest in helping kids.
Frank, I would think one of the ways that you all can help is improving the quality of counsel that these children receive.
Right. Across the land these days, in a lot of areas, folks are talking about outcomes and how we can improve outcomes. We hear a lot about report cards. How are we doing for our kids? How are we doing for our elder folks? How are we doing for folks in need in our public schools and the like? In the practice of law, we've always taken a different approach as lawyers. We take cases generally one case at a time. We meet the client, whether it's a business or an individual. We ask them what their needs are, what their goals are for the case. We fight it out. Sometimes we come to agreement or settlement. Sometimes we tell them, sorry, there's no case here. We don't get to ask very often, how are we doing in our cases and what really works? The project is about the task of trying to identify appropriate outcomes for lawyering for kids and the strategies that work. One example that folks might think about would be a child abuse case. Tragic to most of the world, but these are the things that we do. And we are involved in a sense, facilitating prosecution or supporting the child through her testimony, as well as getting services for the child. Sometimes in helping the child to return home to a family that once was neglectful. So you have to ask, what's success in that case?
Well, you're dealing with 8 communities in 8 different states. Is there an opportunity for you to be a national advocate, or are all these 8 entities have to deal with themselves individually?
Our legal work is mostly locally oriented, representing individual children and small groups of children in the locales where we're situated. Our educational advocacy project, our common policy initiative, is really a national program. Jenny can talk a little bit about what we're trying to achieve in that education program.
We'll give her a chance, but first we got to take a break.
Good.
You're watching The Verdict. We'll be right back. We're getting ready to come back. Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Our guests this week are Frank Cervone and Jenny Weisz, and they're with the National Children's Law Network. When we left, Jenny, you were just about ready to tell us about educational advocacy.
Yes, our NCLN network of 8
National Children's Law Network.
National Children's Law Network decided that education is one of the most important advocacy issues that we need to focus on. And so we've developed a training for educational advocacy, so all those who work with children in a dependency or delinquency can focus on making sure the child stays in school and that they're getting the right school and that they finish school. Now, to explain that a little bit further, in school, every kid has to go to school, but what we found is that often children who are removed from their homes and placed in foster care are left without enrolling in school or not allowed to remain in the school they were in before they got ripped from foster care. So not only are they ripped from their parents, but they're ripped from their teachers, from their school, from their buddies, from their after-school program, and they're left off in a place where they aren't familiar with anything. And so what happens is, the longer they stay in care, the more placements they go to, the less school they go to, the more adjustments they have to make. And guess what? When they get out of the system, they've dropped out of high school, they're more likely to be in delinquency, they're more likely to go into the criminal justice system, they're more likely to be a teen parent, and they're more likely to be homeless. This isn't an outcome any of us want for the children that we as a community are responsible for. So that's why the NCLN has decided to focus on education as a key to making sure children get stability and tools so that when they are adults, they'll go on to college like the rest of us. They'll have goals in life that will be just like the goals we have for our own children, because in effect, these are our children and we're responsible for them. We want to make sure they get what they deserve.
Jenny, let me change the subject just a minute, only slightly. What are you guys doing here in Oklahoma? We're glad to have you, but what are you doing here in Oklahoma?
Well, what we're trying to do, we've been working for about a year now trying to develop a training program that could be sent nationwide so that judges, attorneys, volunteers, other people who work with children can understand how to focus on education as an issue that has kind of been out of the courtroom for too long, and we want to bring it into the courtroom. And so we're going to run it by the experts that are here in Oklahoma. They're going to help us learn from them whether or not this would be a good training program to go nationwide.
Okay. Well, Frank, why was Oklahoma Lawyers for Children brought into this?
Well, it's a simple little question. We were tremendously impressed by this fine young program. As I said earlier, it's about 7 years in existence. Started by 2 fine lawyers, one to my right, Don Nicholson, also from this community, and run by their executive director, Buddy Faye Foster. I came here in 1977 to speak at one of their first programs. 1997, thank you. And was expecting a small room of young lawyers. This is how most volunteer lawyer programs get started. You operate on a shoestring, you recruit lawyers from wherever you can get them, and you try and give them the kind of support that they might need in cases. What I found instead was more than 100 lawyers, some of the leading lawyers from the top firms in town. That told me back then that this was a program that was going places in terms of voluntary service from the local legal community. Soon we found that they would expand into non-lawyer volunteer opportunities. They work with the public defender's office. They take on appeals for that terribly overburdened program, and they fight the good fight. We were also looking for programs in a sense that were diverse in region and in age. We have some long-standing programs. We're real experienced, like Jenny's office and mine. We've been doing this work a long time. we have a sense of how to do these cases. At the same time, we thought it'd be good to have some fresh blood, some new ideas, so that we might be called out of our own box. The 8 programs, as I said, work in either delinquency or dependency and some crossover issues like education. All of the kids who we will serve under the rubric of the project are also involved in some other type of service, mental health, special ed. So in general, they're complex cases. We think Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, like the rest of them, is really up to the task.
Jenny, you've had a chance just briefly to become familiar over your membership in the NCLN to some of Oklahoma's problems.
Right.
What do you see in Oklahoma as the same or different from the types of problems you may have in Los Angeles or Frank has in Philadelphia?
Well, in Los Angeles, we have about 30,000 children in the foster care system, so you can see that's a lot. California itself has just less than 20% of the total number of children in foster care, which is over 500,000 in the U.S. 20%, less than 20%. Just
20% of the nation's?
Yeah, just less than 20% are in California.
Wow.
Now, in Oklahoma, I understand there are about 8,800 children, which is less than 2% of the total in the nation. But I'm struck by how many children are removed from homes and placed in foster care per 1,000. You have one of the highest percentages in the nation of children per 1,000 removed from care.
What do you draw from that? We're pulling them out too quickly, or we're extra vigilant?
Well, I draw from that you're not doing a good job of making sure families stay together with the support systems they need so that children can be safe in their homes, and that you're not returning them to care soon enough. I understand that over 4,000 children are waiting to be adopted. That means, I know you've gotten awards, I understand, for increasing your adoptions, but that really needs to go up a lot more to bring it into line with what the needs of the children are.
I'd add only that the state, like many states, could do better in its prevention side. We need to spend dollars to keep families from getting to the point where they are abusing and neglecting their kids, right? We have to invest in them. This is job skills, this is actual job availability, this is mental health services for the child and for the family, family therapy, specialized counseling services, drug treatment programs. These are the ways that kids get to stay with their families, and we get to rebuild, make those families whole. We don't do well for our kids if we keep, in a sense, dumping them into a system that is overburdened. The advent of crack in the early 90s, in the late 80s and early 90s, changed our world of child welfare. So many families now are involved with drug and alcohol to the point of extreme. We now see across the land the next generation and the third generation of children being raised by young people who have not been themselves taught to be good parents. We can do a better job of teaching how to be good parents.
We're in a 3-year pilot program right now. What happens after that?
Well, we're just building this little project, and we hope to run it with more funding and with more skill. We need to begin to learn how to ask these hard questions about success and about outcomes and study cases over time. We're building a database for our 8 shops. We'll then start pumping cases into that database, actual live cases, where we'll examine at the front end, what do we think we're trying to achieve here? And then at the back end, how did we do? And what got us there? What was successful? What wasn't? So that we might replicate those types of success.
I want to jump in here. We got about a minute or so left. I'd like to give each of you all 30 seconds each to kind of explain to our audience your thoughts on this subject. What do they need to leave this program knowing?
Well, I've been shocked by how many kids have come into care in Oklahoma in the last 14 years. I understand in 1990 there were only 2,000 kids in care, and now there are 8,000. So one thing you can do is become a foster parent. They have one fewer foster home now than they had 14 years ago. So volunteer to be a foster parent, volunteer to adopt, volunteer to be an advocate for children through the program here in Oklahoma City. If you're an attorney, volunteer to help as an attorney. There are lots of ways you can volunteer, be a mentor, step up to the post, help kid.
Frank?
Our policy project is focusing on the educational needs of kids who are involved with the juvenile justice and child welfare system. We want everybody, judges, lawyers, teachers, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, to say, how are you doing in school? What's happening in school? Are we providing the right services for this child to keep him in school? Why isn't he in school? So many of our kids are truant because nobody's caring enough to keep them enrolled or to ensure and encourage that they graduate. Our jails are filled with kids who haven't finished school, and that's doubly so for kids who are involved with the child welfare system.
We're going to have to end it there. Frank Cervone, Jenny Weisz, thank you both for coming to Oklahoma and being on The Verdict.
Thanks, folks.
Sure, thank
Kent
you.
and I'll have a final word after this. Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers here to wrap up another good show.
Oklahoma City is pleased to have this week representatives from the National Children's Law Network, 8 organizations around the country trying to do things for the littlest of our citizens, the least protected and the least protectable. This organization does a grand job of trying to develop new theories of ways to get things done, as Frank said, new outcomes. And we're pleased that they're here. It is something that really does demand the attention of all of our viewers, no matter whether you have children or not, no matter your age, your circumstance, you can do something to help. And I think, Mick, you've got a flurry of websites that you can tell
Well, in our last segment, we usually try to provide website information for those who'd like more information on the subject matter that we've discussed. So let's take a look at the websites that might help you get that information today. There you go. That's advocid.org.
That's Frank's.
We also have publiccounsel.org.
That's Jenny's.
And then here locally in Oklahoma City, OklahomaLawyersForChildren.com. And of course, what would The Verdict be without plugging our own website, theverdict.tv. Go on there, log on, and tell us what you'd like to see in a future episode. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time on The Verdict.